we're going to try to start covering some more defense setups again. So today we're going to talk about the Demon team, which you are more than likely going to see in almost every single tower, as long as, you're in a decent bracket that probably has demons built, since they're an insanely strong team. So for starters, at the core of every demon team, you're going to see Berserk Estarossa. So if you don't know, which I know you know, because there's no reason for you to not know if you're watching a Guild Wars video, he drops his darkness all over the place. An ally that is a demon or a commandment inflicts damage, he will apply a darkness stack. At Fort Darkness, it encroaches, and at encroach, it's minus 40% stats, plus 10% damage taken per darkness stack. You're going to deal a lot of damage. People are going to die, all right? His first ability scales off the amount of darkness that a target has, so even more damage for him. Got a flood attack, and resonance scales off buff, debuff, and stances. So you get kind of everything there, so it hits pretty hard. Now, Esta is sort of a suicide prevention hotline with a depleting an orb as long as somebody dies to his skill use. It's not guaranteed. Obviously, it's going to be on an AI, up to an AI to sort of use an Esta skill to stop suicide from happening, but it's real 50-50 there, so I wouldn't really trust it. But you're going to see him on every demon team, like we said. So the next couple slots are pretty easy. I like to call this one the melee slot. So we're going to take a look at some Meliodases. So what melees are we looking for specifically? So obviously not any of these base demon melees. Those are the links. We're not going to look at the captain melees because those are also basically link. Counter melee is a link, SR melee no, and Halloween melee no. So it comes down to, first off, Lost Vein. Lost Vein, he's like a suicide unit, I would say. He's really good at suicide just because of the fact that his abilities, his whole kit revolves around getting his ult. He wants to rush ult. So you could use him much better on an offense team that is either ulting often via ult rush comp, right? Or you're using a suicide comp with a 6/6 LV and his relic that just pretty much one-shots a lot of comps. So I'd keep him on offense. I wouldn't really worry about using him on defense. Next, I would say we have Perg Melee. He's a pretty good option. I think he's sort of the standard option these days. So his kit is pretty much full DPS, sort of revolves around popping off when his true magic is online. So he starts off with 3 shackles every time him and our allies, I think, takes damage during an enemy's turn. 1 shackle is removed. Once the shackles are gone, true magic kicks in, cleanses himself, and it's a plus 50% attack buff. Now, because of the plus 50% attack buff, he does kind of like going second, so you can also use him on a suicide team. He would work pretty well. I think we did like a zombie-style extended suicide with him with Princess Liz, so that works pretty nicely. You could also do Assault Mode melee. He works pretty well on a debuff-centric team, I would say, just because of the fact that he drops literally a bunch of debuffs on the enemy team. He likes to buff his basic stats. He's your DPS option as well. We got Amplify, we got Rupture. I wouldn't run him without his Relic. His Relic sort of really brings his kit up to a more modern standard, right? So the last melee is Demon King melee. He's your 7 Deadly Sins offense melee. I would leave him on that. We've seen him before. He absolutely wipes, so that's probably where he's best at. I guess you technically have Trader melee. Most of the time in the past, we have used him on a Pierce setup, which I think we've talked about. It's a really old comp. Pierce isn't really used anymore, so I would say that this melee isn't used that much anymore. Maybe if you get a Relic, it'll sort of change things up. I guess if you don't have any other options, it's not bad because of his passive. He does give you... the damage reduction, but you would have to make sure that your team does focus more on single target attacks versus AoEs, right? So there's a couple different styles of demon teams with that in mind. I guess the next slot we'll talk about is the Zeldris slot. So obviously recently Zeldris did get an LR, so I guess we'll talk about that first. His LR is super glass cannon-y. I mean, he was already pretty glass cannon-y before. He focuses on crits. I think they did a pretty decent job at making sure that he can crit. He's pretty good at it. But what he does bring to the team overall is sort of just outclassed by, better Zeldrises, I would say. So when it comes to, I don't know, utility, he does have Ult Drain, and he does have crit resistance, crit res down on an AoE. His ult is mid, spike. His relic isn't terrible. It focuses on ult gauge removal and buffing allies' basic stats. So you do want to make sure, I mean, it's not like you can make sure, but in order for that to pop off, he's going to be want to be using this skill, and then you're going to want to be using his commandment, which I think probably not the best commandment to use these days, but that's fine. Next up is going to be the Ominous Nebula Eldris. His passive is pretty goated, pretty throated and goated. So he's buffing attack-related stats and decreasing enemies' attack stats per ally that has a demon, that is a demon or has a commandment. Pulverize on his rank 1. Infect, really strong. We know how often people like to recover. Obviously, it doesn't really help against Gelda comps, but I don't think you're going to see Gelda comps too often. His ult is mid. Weak point kind of sucks on an ult. His relic is nice. Sort of a debuff-centric team again. So I think if you really wanted to do something like this, you know, you run the Ominous Nebula Zeldris, we throw in Assault Mode melee here. You sort of have a debuff setup, which is pretty nice because I think this works well with the Demon Chandler. Increases damage dealt based on debuffs on each enemy, right? So this, I would say, is a sort of a debuff style demon team. So keep those passives in mind depending on what you have and how you want to build it. I think obviously the real winner when it comes to the Zeldris slot is going to be the Demon King, because what he provides to the table is much more significant than the other Zeldrises, because as we saw, that's not his name, Tyrant. His infect is a little better, right? Mark of Death restricts recovery related, and it's a crit res down and a crit res and crit def down. So he basically combines both of the debuffs from LR Zeldris and Ominous Nebula Zeldris and cracks them out completely. Not to mention he has retrocession. Demons take a lot less damage. He himself has a damage cap, and then once the Ruler's Reign is gone, he gets crazy attack buffs. So super strong, super crazy DPS. If that was the case, I'd probably leave Perg Melee back on. This is sort of a nuke team, like a ticking time bomb. Like 2 turns pass, this man has True Magic, this man has Ruler's Reign gone. They probably have darkness stacks all over the place. It's going to be a ton of fucking damage. I think if you were doing something like that, this comp is a little more AoE centric, and so I would probably run the Red Mons beat in your flex slot. So something like this, because your turn 1 is going to look like a Demon King AoE debuff, and then you're going to see, oh no, we want this, yes. Red Monspeed, I'm sure most people might not be familiar. I think it's easier for me to just remove him and click on him here. He has an AoE, how do you spell this? There we go. He has an AoE weak point, right? On his, what is it, second skill here. AoE weak point, which is good for demons. Demons like AoEs when you have Esta, because you can apply darkness to multiple units. So if you're using a setup like this, right, your turn 1 is going to be Infect, AoE, AoE, right? This AoE takes priority because of the weak point, and then this is just the next skill in line. So when it comes back to you, the entire enemy team is already set up with 3 darkness stacks, which is huge for your team. Massive amount of buffs, really susceptible to an early kill with Encroach coming out. So, Esta slot, Melee slot, Zeldris slot, Flex slot. If you don't want to run Monspeed, you can take a look at some other options. There is Demon Kusak, sort of the PvP 3v3 kind of god backline unit, right? Buffs crit chance, nerfs crit chance and crit damage to the enemy team. Buffs the allies' attack-related stats. So, he's pretty good. Decent backslot. He's got an AoE a debuff, but that's going to have some conflicting priorities with this debuff. Obviously, we're going to want to see this one much more often than this one, just because this is an infect, a crit res down, a crit def down, all packed into one. So, pretty big. We talked about Awakened Chandler. Who else is there? You could do Gelda. Gelda's new. She's sort of the spice right now, right? This could be a comp. She kind of goes crazy. What's her thing here? Also a demon, yeah. Crazy amount of additional HP based on lifesteal. She can't be infected, so that's pretty good. A lot of comps you're going to see probably going to run infect if people are still running Rimuru. If you're hitting your own opposing demon team, she's going to be a pretty good tech in that sort of sense. I guess when it comes to budget options, right? If you don't have, if you're looking for something in your flex slots, I think that kind of covers it. I mean, you could do Gmella, right? She does have the buff for basic stats. That's not terrible. Green Monspeed doesn't really do what Red Monspeed does. Blue Dairy, if for a taunt, maybe. That's kind of old school. If you're down bad, that could work out. Blue Chandler also for his taunt because the stance is kind of cracked, though the priority can be a little tricky because it's a stance. They don't always do that on turn one, sort of like Tarmiel's stance if you ever fight an Angel team. Sometimes they stance, sometimes they don't. It's the same thing in Hero Arena. It's a little more consistent with Dairy because it's a buff, so she kind of spams that, but that can also kind of not be that good. So I guess the budget Zeldris slot, you do have Red Zeldris. He has a train on his rank 1 here. He has a super budget infect, disable recovery skills, right? I mean, that's not even really infect, honestly. That just turns off. Not a lot of units use recovery skills. If you're running Angels, your offense Angel team probably has Green Alat, who I believe has a recovery skill, and that's that. I mean, he'd have Prio there because it's red into green, and I don't think you're running another Green Angel, so that's like the only time that skill is useful. Vessels Eldris isn't also a bad option. He's focused on debuffs, so if you didn't have Ominous Nebula and you were doing the more debuff centric comp like this, I mean, just looking at this looks terrible. I'm not gonna lie, but I mean, this is super budget. You know, you got to work with what you got. This is obviously much better because of its relic. Again, it doesn't work if you don't have his relic, so don't even bother, right? But every debuff you're increasing allies' basic stats. So I would want to look at something like this, because I think is his first skill AoE, I believe. Yeah, so this could also lead to a triple. Actually, it won't because there's no priorities here. That's the other thing. It is a triple AoE comp, but it doesn't have prio, so you're not getting triple AoE darkness on the first turn. But yeah, I think that kind of covers it for the most part. I think maybe the like current team that you probably run into in higher elo brackets might look something like that. It might also look like this. These are totally fine. I think when it comes to placements, it particularly matters in this setup, which we talked about earlier. Put the Monspeed here because his weak point will have prio. Debuff has prio. This attack doesn't have any prio, so that'll just kind of come down as it comes. I'd keep S in the far left just because we don't want him burning his covert action skill too early when there are no darkness stacks to scale off of. I think that pretty much covers all the relevant demons. I guess that's, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. And in terms of links, I don't think links are going to matter too much aside potentially Red Tarmiel on Gelda. I think that would be broken. If you can afford to put a Red Tarmiel on Gelda, that'd be good. Demon King Tyrant could also use Red Tarm. Esta could benefit from Red Tarm. I don't think you need to put a Sariel or a Mael or anything like that on your melee. But if you really needed to double Grace crack your team, sure, go for it, right? Obviously, the card set's going to be the Demon Artifact card set. There's nothing really that's replacing that. And then depending on your setup, your buffs are going to change, right? So again, if your bracket has an idea of your CC threshold, then you're going to want to look for buffing into that threshold. So running HP buffs until you hit it, and then maybe running attack buffs. If you're running double darkness like this, you're probably going to want to buy darkness buffs. If you're running like double blue, which is pretty much the only other thing that's going to happen, if your team, looks something like this and like this, then you could get some really easy CC because this team is, triple blue. So that's going to change that. I guess in terms of gears, honestly, just run HP on everybody. It doesn't really... You're going to go first. You want to go first, right? You want to make sure that the enemy team can't go first, right? That's the idea. if you meet the CC threshold and you're using buffs with it, what you could do if you really want to cuck the enemy team is run like crit res and crit def in the middle, like you do when you attack. So that could be crazy. I wouldn't worry about doing that just because you do have the upper hand of going first, so it's kind of not needed. But if the gap is that big, then yeah, why not go for it? So I think that's pretty much going to cover the demon team. If you guys like to drop a thumb, maybe so if you're into that, and I'll see you in the next one.